Hi, everybody. I'm waiting for you all to join. As promised, I want to talk about everything that's going on in terms of preparing for the reopening of schools. So I'll just wait a few minutes for other people to join in. The topic for today is rethinking back to school. I've been hearing so much about everything that school districts are grappling with and state departments. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about what I know decision makers are thinking about and what you probably need to be thinking about as a classroom teacher, as a school leader, principal or assistant principal, as a district official, those of you who are involved in your local community, those of you who are in ministry where churches provide an educational service to the community. All stakeholder groups need to be thinking about the reopening of school, what it looks like, what it means for all the different stakeholders. So that's what today's conversation is about. I'm starting a series with this, so I'll be doing this for several of you, so just keep that in mind. Let me make sure my volume is all the way up. Thank you for joining. I see a few of you joining me, so thank you for joining in. I just want to go through 7 quick things on rethinking back to school. I've been doing a lot of consulting work and trying to advise various constituents about what needs to be taken into consideration, especially parents and teachers, but not solely limited to you all. But we need to have a broader conversation and bring all stakeholders to the table. I've been seeing a lot of comments across social media about going back to church, going back to work, going back to our favorite restaurants, going back to all of the small businesses that we support. But it's a much, much bigger issue when it comes to education. Everything in our country, believe it or not, sits on the shoulders of our educational system, whether you are involved in the public side or the private side. Our country sits on the shoulders of the educational system, and education is really critical because what you don't know can hurt you. That's not the jingle we were told as young kids, but I promise you, what you don't know can hurt you. So I'm Dr. Kathy Owens-Oliver. For those of you who are joining and you may not know me, I'm the founder of Educational Effectiveness Group. We do lots of consulting with schools and districts and teachers and other education entities who are trying to improve classroom practice and make very smart decisions about teaching and learning. So this is the beginning of my series, Rethinking Back to School, and I just want to talk to you about several different steps, issues, principles that need to be taken into consideration as schools and states consider reopening. Please like and share this video with your friends and colleagues across the country because it's going to help you when it comes time for you to get involved in the decision making. So the first thing we have to think about, I'm sure you know, is safety. Everyone, governors, district superintendents, school boards, local education agencies, state educational agencies, educator preparation programs, colleges, everyone is thinking about safety, safety, safety. People are concerned about the research. I hope you're concerned about the research. We want to be careful not to get lax about taking care of ourselves and washing our hands and being careful who's around us and still practicing social distance. If you watch what's happening with other countries, we may have started our social distancing process a little too late, and now we're paying a dear price for it. So safety is really critical. If you've been watching me on social media, you know I've posted a couple articles what the national department is saying about funneling money to private schools. We don't think that intention is going to be carried out, but that is a concern. There are pros and concerns about privatization, and given what's going on right now with this national pandemic, lots of parents have reached out to me about making that decision, about homeschool, about creative homeschooling, where someone in your neighborhood or someone who lives next to you per se, or even in your family, is teaching lots of children, 10 or 12, of children that they know personally, whose homes that they know personally. So there are just lots of issues that need to be taken into consideration when it comes to safety. You need to check out the latest ABC News report of what's happening in schools. They show lots of compelling videos and pictures, and they really talk about these issues where people are already planning how they will set schools up for back to school, moving desks 6 feet apart, and saying that they're going to do ongoing intermittent sanitization throughout the school day and those kinds of things. So safety is a really big issue. I have to tell you though, what we may have to do in traditional brick and mortar schools in order to create a truly safe environment really does have a huge impact on the teaching and learning experience that I think both local and state leaders really need to take into consideration. And that's some of what I've been sharing when I've had a seat at the table, or a seat in the Zoom meeting, I should say. So the first thing is taking into consideration safety. We all know that children are not going to consistently practice being 6 feet away from each other at all times. It's virtually impossible, especially those that are under 12 years old. That has to be taken into consideration. School is a social environment. In the classroom and every other part of the school building, schooling is a social environment. From going to the bus stop or being driven to the bus stop, getting on the bus, riding to school, getting off the bus, walking through the halls, going to breakfast where breakfast is served, going to classrooms, going to the media center. Children will have huge difficulty practicing social distancing. And for those who have been at home throughout these last couple of months, they have not been social distancing in the home. So to assume they'll go into a classroom and intentionally just stay 6 feet away from each other, not going to happen. We need a better plan, a better way to do it. We need to teach children everything we want them to know and be able to do. So I'll come back to that later, but you all understand safety. A big part of the safety issue is exposure. It's not just children in the classroom, it's everybody else that they get exposed to, as you heard me say, from the bus stop to the classroom and on. After school events, extracurricular events, maybe those things will be canceled, but I'm not sure what social distancing will really look like for adolescents and early childhood environment. So we need to think all of that through. Lots more conversation has to be said about that. It's not okay for school boards to just post a PowerPoint that says we're going to practice social distancing, we're going to wear masks, we're going to sanitize. How are you going to do that? How are you going to enforce it or implement it? How are we going to do it well to protect safety? And all of them are saying, after we've done these things, then we'll just go back to online teaching if there's a resurge. I wish it was just that simple. So I've been having a few conversations with people who are saying, Kathy, you got to help us think out the box about this kind of things. And I'd be happy to do that for you as well. Number one, safety. Number two, class size. Class size is a really big issue. If a classroom that once held 25 students now has them all spread 6 feet apart, will that classroom still be able to accommodate 25 students? Absolutely not. What will we do with the other students? What will it look like? Will fewer teachers teach more children, or vice versa? Will there be more teachers to accommodate more classrooms or more space? It is really a conundrum. It's not a simple thing. Parents and classroom teachers, please pay attention to what I'm saying, because you are most often not at the decision-making table. So you have to read and process this information, get a consult from someone who really understands how this is going. It is a really huge issue, and it's not as simple as what we think. And we can't do schools the way we do grocery stores. Someone will stand outside, we'll have tape marked on the sidewalk, we'll have it marked all through the rows in the grocery store, and then you'll know how far to stay apart. Please wear your own mask and gloves. I promise you, teaching and learning is not that simple at all levels. P14. pre-kindergarten through the senior year in college. Number one, safety. Number two, class size. Number three, scheduling. This is a big one. I've been paying attention to districts here in North Carolina where I live, but I've also been looking at districts across the country at some of the things that they're doing. When you look at Texas, when you look at New Jersey, some of the thinking around New York, we have to pay attention, and we have to come together and have a smart, informed conversation collaboratively. Scheduling is big. Lots of schools are talking about staggered scheduling. What does that look like? Maybe some students, certain groups of students will go to school Monday, Wednesday, and half day Friday. The others will go Tuesday, Thursday, and half day Friday. It's very creative, some of the different schedules that they're coming up with. In some areas, they're discussing where school is 8 to 1 for some and 2 to 6 for others. There are programs out there for high schools that had school from 10 to 7. They're having to now look at staggered schedules. Schools that are on block scheduling, especially in the secondary environment, they're thinking differently about what they look like. A day, B day, who comes on whichever one. These are serious issues that parents and teachers have to make sure they're not left out of these conversations about these topics. So scheduling is another issue. Great. It's great to schedule. It's great to do Monday, Wednesday, half Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, half Friday. But what will parents do on the off days when their children aren't going to school and they don't have anyone to take care of them? What will they do when the teenager is going on different days than the younger child and still they don't have anyone to take care of them? Who's going to come in their house and babysit or be the nanny, if you will? And are you concerned about safety in your own home when it comes to that? These are serious issues. And teachers, ding, 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 ding. You heard me say in my last series that teacher employment is going to look very, very different. Listen, employment everywhere looks very, very different. We can fully expect lots of layoffs among educators. There will be a need for less teachers in some cases, and there will be a greater need for more specialized teaching in some cases. Just think about the online environment and what's been happening. I'm going to talk about that in the next series, but teachers, if ever you needed my AWOL program, now is the time. You can find out about that on my website. So safety, class size, scheduling, staffing is what I'm getting into now. How do we staff the schools? Custodial work, cafeteria work, bus drivers and other transportation, school leaders. I've been talking to lots of principals because I've been doing some leadership coaching over the years with assistant principals, helping them think about their trajectory and career guidance and what they want to do with what they know. And I've been in contact with them for the last several weeks, and they're really trying to, think through staffing where maybe you don't need 3 or 4 principals to be going online and evaluating teacher performance. All of these kinds of things need to be taken into consideration when it comes to staffing. And all the other people, I call it whole school educators. Everybody else working in the building who's not necessarily in an instructional role, they're very important to moving school forward and keeping students engaged. We have to think about who they are and what their work looks like during this new way of thinking about schools. Another one is the online piece. I promise you, there are pockets of great success across the country in this online teaching and learning environment, and then some of it has been abysmal for a host of reasons. I'm explaining this to you because to say we'll go back to school almost in a business kind of way, flare up or breakout of the virus, then we'll just go back to it's not as simple as just going back to online, because some of what we've seen online already has not been effective. In some cases, teachers have said, I was thrown into this classroom without walls and I was not prepared for teaching in an online environment. In many cases, school districts hurried up and gave some online training for how to use the software, not how to use it for teaching. Using technology in ways that really help you communicate your curriculum, not just so that students can see you on camera. So that has been a challenge, and not just on the teacher side, online teaching, but the online learning piece where students weren't prepared to be learning in an online environment. And all over the world, young children look at their computer screens and their tablets and their phones, those who have access to them, that's another whole series. I have to do a whole series on the equity piece and what that means for some of our most difficult challenges in the educational arena and some of our most needy communities. But from an online learning perspective, there are children who really haven't been able to maximize how to use the technology for their own learning, and they're in homes and environments where there's not an adult around to help them with it easy. So it's not as easy as it sounds to just say, well, if we have a flare up in our back to school plan, we'll just go back to online learning. Listen to this. Do you know how many children were going to school out of districts that some districts had no idea? They were staying at Nana's house or Grandma's house or the cousin's house or the auntie's house so that they could go to the better school or go to the different school. That's a critical issue. Thank you for liking and sharing this recording. We're already doing that. So when schools got ready to give them iPads or laptops or what have you, tablets to take home, they could not find them. And the address that they had for them either wasn't legitimate or wasn't even in their school district. There's a huge volume of that group that would really surprise you. So that's another thing we have to think about in this distance learning environment. We have to consider what the successes have been, what the challenges have been. Training on how to use it effectively has been a big one, both for teachers and administrators as well as for students. And like I said, we won't even get into access and equity and getting the equipment to places that need them in these school districts where one family got a laptop but there are 4 kids in the family. It's been so difficult. And I want to say school districts and school leaders, principals have really done the best that they could do. I have seen them make heroic efforts to ensure that all the students have the access that they need. But as I said, there have been some successes and some challenges. Number 6, assessment and displacement. This is probably the biggest issue. How do we determine where students are in their learning in an effort to move them to the next grade or not? That has been big. Lots of school districts simplified it by saying you get a pass or fail if you participated in the online environment at all. Okay, so you're going to pass. You get satisfactory or unsatisfactory. If you were doing well before the pandemic and you had satisfactory performance in the classroom, as long as you showed up online, then your work has been satisfactory. But what about those who were doing well before the pandemic? Their work was satisfactory, but in this online environment, it has not been. For a host of reasons some of us may never know. Not just because the students weren't consistent or the parents didn't make them log on. It's so much to that piece. We have to have really serious, critical conversations about this. And displacement is another issue. Students who are in one school won't be there again. They're staying with a different relative. They've moved. Their parents lost their home for whatever reason. They went back to where they were really living in the first place, and now they'll be back in the school zone of where they really should have been. This is a conundrum. It's like a ball of yarn. It is not simple. We have to have long, thoughtful, informed conversations about this and what it looks like. And then my last piece, number 7, is teacher quality. So I just rolled out about 7 things I've been grappling with and helping other educators grapple with. 1, safety. Number 2, class size. Number 3, scheduling. Number 4, staffing. Number 5, online teaching. Number 6, assessment and displacement and what that really means. And then this last one, number 7, teacher quality. And I don't want to offend any of my professional colleagues out there. Teachers and nurses are some of the greatest, if not the greatest, essential workers in the world. But I have to tell you, skills are very diverse. There is a lot of variance among teacher skills and of all ages, I have to say. So teacher quality is really an issue in this online environment. It's not just what they're saying, but how they're doing it in an online environment, but it is also what they are saying, what they're able to teach, how to put forth the curriculum. It has been a struggle for many of them to live in this online environment. I have seen a countless number of instances where the children are so far ahead of the teachers in how to manage an online environment, how to utilize all of the software. And on the one hand, you may be saying, well, that's good, Dr. O, because they could just work together. But the teacher must have a command of the classroom, a command of the learning, and they need to know how to transfer what they had in written or electronic lesson plans into an environment that allows them to do what you hear me always say, your A game to the screen stage. That has been a challenge for so many teachers, trying to figure out, how do I take everything that I was doing in my actual classroom with my own support system that I had built and resources at my fingertips, and limit it to this small window of a screen where my students are just out there doing anything, exposed to everything. It is a classroom management issue. It is an assessment issue. It is absolutely a differentiated education issue, where you have to focus on what's appropriate for these students at this time versus what's appropriate for those students at this time. That's a critical issue. Formative assessment has been a big issue. If you aren't having individual interviews, phone calls, one-on-one Zoom sessions or Hangouts or meetings in Google Classroom with students one-on-one, there's no way that you can be giving them the kinds of hands-on learning that they would have had in your actual classroom. I'm not in any way discrediting the work of teachers. You heard me say they've been heroes, but I am saying that teacher quality has really been challenged in this environment. So what does that mean? It means we cannot go back to school with business as usual. I know that. I'm not crazy. I know that these stakeholder groups are getting together trying to come up with the best plan. But I promise you, after 3, 4, 5 days, weeks in the room, and the best you can come out with is, we'll use social distancing and move desks apart. We'll do some sanitizing throughout the day. And if there's a flare-up, then we'll just go back to online teaching. It is not that simple. We need very detailed, comprehensive implementation plans, and I mean implementation with fidelity, of what this is really going to look like. And let me say this. I have lots of friends across the country, colleagues, and I know lots of parents who are saying, there is no way my child is going back to the building the way school used to be. Homeschooling is bursting at the seams. If you've been watching just commercials on television, everyone is launching an online learning program. This is the environment for online teaching until we really get a handle on testing and access to testing in this country, and where all the hotspots are, what is creating the hotspots. It's a big deal. So it's not enough to just put during the school board meeting a few points of what you've been talking about. We need comprehensive plans. I'm here to help you, certainly, if you need me. I've been helping some others already. Let me end with this. Here are my recommendations, because you've heard me say a lot during this segment on what the issues are. Here are some of my recommendations. I will be sharing a series on this, Rethinking Back to School, so I'll be sharing a lot more of my thoughts. If you want to reach out to me, you can email me at info@drkathyo.com. Follow me on Dr. Kathy O on all social media, or visit my website, www.drkathyo.com. But in the meantime, here are some of my recommendations right away. I am pleading, urging, screaming to school districts everywhere, looping. I didn't say loopy, even though parents are feeling that way, having to teach their children at home. I'm saying looping. Looping means the cyclical effect, where students go from one grade to the next, but they keep the same teacher or the same couple of teachers that they may have had. So if you out there are a teacher and you were teaching 7th and 8th grade science and math, and you worked with a co-teacher who did the social studies and language arts, and then perhaps another team of resource teachers, I'm strongly recommending that you go back to that process, that you recommend it to your principals and other school leaders. I'm recommending this to districts and states. If ever there was a time when the looping on research were held valuable and you wanted to do a tryout of how this works, this is the time. I recommend it really for the entire fall year, whether it is online or in person or half and half. I'm recommending that students go back to the same classroom and teacher, not necessarily the same grade. When I was a high school student years ago, I didn't realize that in my English honors class, I was involved in a looping program. At that time, it wasn't even called that. So I and a cadre of my own peers had the exact same English teacher from ninth grade through 12th grade. We were all in the honors track, and so because she was the honors English teacher, she had us every year. So from ninth grade to 12th grade, I had the exact same classmates in my English class. I had different teachers for math, different teachers for science and other topics, but the continuity of learning, the consistency of assessment, the rapport that Mrs. Gilchrist, rest her soul, had with all of us, what she knew about me as a writer, what she knew about me as a thinker, what she understood about students who could problem solve and who could not, how we made meaning from literature, literary or literacy struggles were. She had all of that information. So she was a master teacher to us because she got to know us personally. She got to know our learning. She got to know our strengths and challenges and areas of limitation. She was able to help us hone our skills. That then was looping, and I didn't know it. So now students are going back to school all over the place in their learning, in assessment, in their individual needs, in their emotional and social needs, trauma that they've been exposed to. They need the continuity of not having to get to know a teacher and that teacher not having to get to know them. And get this, there's no data, there are no test results, there's nothing to go by in terms of learning gains. There will be some for more progressive, effective teachers who have conducted their own formative and summative assessments. Ding, ding, ding. I'll be talking about that in my AWOL program. But a lot of teachers just have not. I've been hearing that in some school districts, the teacher will write up a feedback form and then pass that on for the next teacher. I'm assuming that will include some competencies as well as benchmarks and milestones. I recommend that includes some level of emotional intelligence, the rapport you have with these students, some classroom management successes and challenges, anything you know about the student's personal life. I mean, come on. Don't just write up a half a page that says Kathy participated in the online environment. She was always on time. She understood the technology, and I think she knows the literary terms. And I'm not saying this to downplay the value of teachers' role in assessment. I'm just saying that we need deep formative analysis and feedback of where students are in their development to pass that on to the next teacher. It's not that simple. It's not consistent. It needs to be more comprehensive. It's not district-wide. Therefore, it's not going to work. So what we're going to do then is looping, what you've heard me say earlier. All of the kids go back to the same teacher for the first, come on you guys, let's do at least a minimum of 3 weeks. If you don't believe me, you can believe me though. I've got over 25 years doing this, working with schools and districts and colleges and state departments and school boards and national organizations all over the country. I promise you, this is the best way to make this work. Everybody goes back to the same classroom and the same teacher for several weeks. Do it for a minimum of 3 weeks, but 6 weeks is good. The first grading period is good if you're on kind of a 9-week grading scale. The whole semester is the best thing to do. I heard about one state that is going to continue the online experience until December. And then starting in January, they'll be going back to school. That, of course, is a state that has really strong online learning practices, policies, procedures, and training in place. But for those who don't have it, in some places it really has been somewhat of a tragedy or travesty as people have struggled their way through it. So I'm just recommending that everybody go back to the same classroom. Now you're saying to me, well, what about those who are moving on from 8th grade to 9th grade? They need to go back to the 8th grade teacher, but get this, you're not ready for this. They need to begin, not jump in whole hog, but they need to begin with where they left off to a certain degree. There has to be some kind of informed assessment of student learning, where they are on a continuum and how to get from A to B. And no one can do that better than the teacher they've already had. You get past who they are. You should know that by now. You get past their learning styles and how they learn, certainly. You know that by now. You know what's going on with their families. You know some of the things that they've dealt with. You have the opportunity right now to stay in connection with them over the summer. So they'll go to the same grade for a few weeks, and then it would be great in environments where you could go ahead and start introducing the next curriculum. But you really don't have to. I promise you, 90% of them are behind anyway. It is those college students and high school students in their senior year who were the most affected by timing and scheduling, because they were trying to get what they needed to move on to college, or college students were getting what they needed to move on to jobs and internships or the next semester. So that's a whole other conundrum that I've been consulting and working with people on. But in terms of the K-12 classroom, they need to go back to the same classroom. That teacher needs to have a whole new plan of how they're going to conduct formative and summative assessments, so that when they make the switch to the next, you've already introduced some of the curriculum and you're able to move them forward, and the next teacher is able to really pick up where they left off. That in many cases isn't done in a traditional school calendar, where everybody takes the summer off and then they go to a brand new teacher. They have to learn the teacher has to learn them, all of those things. So that's really important. And then let me end with equity and the learning lag. So most of you should know about the learning gap. Every summer, we see anywhere from 6 weeks to 8 weeks of what is called a learning gap. I guess in layman's terms, that means that students in a K-12 environment in particular, they lose about 6 to 8 weeks worth of what they have been taught in the previous year. That was in our normal, traditional calendar, which is probably the reason why some year-round schools have been so successful. But that was the normal way that we had done it in the past. Okay, so that isn't being done in that anymore if we move to looping, because now we have some level of continuity. But you're still going to have the learning gap, and it is going to be greater now than it has ever been. The equity issue is going to have much more disparity now than it has ever had. What are we going to do about that? And I'm sorry, folks, saying that we'll do social distancing, saying that we'll sanitize classrooms, saying that we will let students move forward with a pass or fail, and then if we have a flare-up, then we'll just go back to online teaching. That does not deal with the equity issue at all. You can't plan reopening of schools without taking into consideration assessment of student learning, as well as how they're going to move forward in the realm of continuity. You have to take into consideration that. These are really, really critical issues. So I've been talking a long time. You heard me say this is the beginning of my next series, Rethinking Back to School. I was doing some of this in my consulting work already, but it's prime time now to do it so much more, as people are really problem solving and grappling with what to do next. I want to make sure that parents, whether you're utilizing vouchers, whether your child is in public or private school or homeschooling or whatever it is, I want you to really make sure that they're thinking through all of these issues of student learning and equitable practice in the classroom and across schools are two really critical conversations. We need to have this conversation at large. I'm available to have it with you anytime. If you're a classroom teacher and you're watching me today and you have a minimum of 5 years teaching experience, I would love for you to join my AWOL Pro cohort that's coming up, Advancing Without Leaving the Profession. I promise you, no matter what happens this fall, you're going to need some plans for yourself, for your career, for yourself as a thinking partner and as a thought leader. I want to help you develop just that. So follow me at Dr. Kathy O on social media. Write to me at info@drkathyo.com. Thank you so much for joining this. Tune in, as I'll be doing this every week, Newsday Tuesdays with Dr. O. Thank you so much for sharing this video. If you missed it, or if you know somebody else who would like to watch it, it'll be available later on today on YouTube. Have a good afternoon. Be safe.